Okay. Anyway, you know, people here may or may not have read LaRouche's latest paper, or not the very latest paper, which is going to be coming out this week, but the one that came out a few weeks ago on Nicholas of Cusa, The Strategic Situation Now. But I was very struck by it, and there's an enormous amount of material in here which is extremely rich in terms of trying to figure out some of what Scott was addressing, namely, what is wrong with the population? And how did we, because it is a question, I mean, you look back, we've now listened to a number of speeches by President Kennedy, and you hear in his speaking a totally different quality. Here's someone who talks about what people did 50 years earlier, what is the world's going to look like 50 years from now, and he locates what he's doing as the President of the United States in a span of human history. And then you think about even the best presidents in the recent times. Take President Clinton, who was by no means an idiot. But you actually cannot think of a single, I can't think of any time when he was not reacting to a current event. In other words, there was nothing that he did, and he's the best we have to look at in the lifespan of people today, that actually paved the way for something 50 years from now or 100 years from now, which is a very interesting thing. So we've been robbed of a way of thinking critically, and LaRouche always talks about the assassination of JFK, but then the subsequent assassination of his younger brother, which sort of sealed the fate of the United States. And you had, after that, a real turning point. It was the end of Nawapa. It was the end of, you had the King assassination, the Kennedy assassination, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy, the Vietnam War, and you had a takeover by the so-called environmentalist movement, which says that human life is bad. Right? Don't act for the future. The best thing you can do for the future is to stop consuming, stop eating, stop breathing, stop using energy, right? So you had a total reversal. And so the question is why and how can we educate ourselves to get this back? And that's what LaRouche really is addressing, and I wanted to take it up from the standpoint of something that he mentions, which is Shakespeare's play, Henry V, which the more I looked at it, the more fascinating and paradoxical it became. But at any rate, I wanted to start with a couple things from this paper. And he talks about this question of metaphor, and people may have heard he's mentioned it quite a bit over the last few months, and he's not generally very satisfied with the way our organization's representatives discuss it. So I always feel like I'm going out on a limb a little bit. But what he says here is a strict meaning of the term metaphor does not refer to a particular explicitly direct object or set of objects. It refers to an implied simultaneity among a very special quality of several indirectly related objects. And if people know the work that we always talk about, Johannes Kepler, the way that Kepler was able to figure out the order of the planets was that there was the visual data which had been compiled by Tycho Brahe, which is just observations of where these planets were sighted when. And then the question of harmonic proportions, musical intervals. And there is not a direct relationship between sight and sound. You don't see what you hear generally, although some people experience a phenomenon like that. So Kepler, taking these two contradictory sense perceptions, and the other paradox is, of course, do you consciously hear the harmonics of the planets? As we're sitting here on Earth, are we noticing that we're hearing a me? You know, when you look at another planet, do you hear another note? It's not actually perceived by your physical senses, but you can have a comprehension of harmony in your mind. So this is what Kepler was working with, and using these principles which exist in the mind, he was able to figure out with more precision than anyone previously and anyone who had taken all of these minute observations what the nature of the solar system actually is. So LaRouche goes on to say, consider the case of such an apparent characteristic of a shadow-like object cast as such a pair or more. In such cases, we are able to conceptualize the specific effect which accounts for the generation of the shadow of such a pairwise or comparable shadow, but we do not, quote-unquote, see the relevant sort of linkage among these considerations which pertain to that which has either been a pair of shadows or some larger set of such an array, as might be defined by named characters. Functionally, we do not see the actual object. The real character is actually performed not on the stage, even if one were there. It lies in the idea implanted in the minds of the audience viewing the actor or actors. This is to be recognized not by vision, but as to be seen within the mind of the viewing audience, rather than a projection on a linear screen. It cannot be seen with the mere eyes and ears of the audience, but only by means of the superior potentialities of that power of the human mind, which creates the images of those personalities called to the mind of the audience by means of a higher power of the human mind, a power of an ontological order higher than any mere brain as such. And we're going to look at some of these. And then he talks about the question of a footprint. And that's a really interesting thing because, you know, if you think about seeing a footprint or a series of footprints somewhere, every person would simply assume that that series of footprints was generated by somebody walking, even though you didn't see the person walking. Now, what if it happened that part of the footprint appeared on one day and the parts that represent the toes appeared on a different day at a different time? Then you would say, well, wait a minute, this is not, what I thought I was looking at is not really what this is. It has to be something else, right? Or what if you saw walking footprints and then there was an extra foot going along beside it, right? In other words, you'd have to come up with an hypothesis to explain this without seeing what the cause was. And you don't know, maybe it's a guy with one leg who has crutches which have feet on the bottom of them. In other words, we make a lot of assumptions and often take for granted what the cause of something is without actually knowing what it is. And that's why, in most cases, the way that you make a discovery about what actually is the cause, the unseen cause of something, is you can make the discovery based on the thing that is anomalous. So if you just saw a pair of footprints going off evenly spaced, you know, left, right, left, right, left, right, you would assume it was a person walking. But if you notice that there was a third foot going along the side of it, then you might begin to question what was going on here. Was it really a person walking, or who knows, maybe it's a wheelchair with feet on it. I mean, you don't know. And then you'd have to investigate and actually figure out what the cause of the thing is. And this is very important with Kepler's work because what they did, for example, with the orbit of Mars is that everyone prior to Kepler said, well, it looks like it's off just a little, but we're going to assume that this perfect circle, it's a perfect circle, and the error is just in our observation. You've heard the expression close enough to fit. So everyone prior to him said, well, we're just going to curve fit it, and assume that it's a perfect circle because we know God is perfect and God would only make perfectly circular orbits, and that's how it has to be. And Kepler, with his work, discovered there were, I think, 8 minutes of arc, a very small, but he said, no, this is significant. This margin of not error, but something sticking out from not being a circle I have to figure out what that is. And with that, he discovered that the orbits of the planets were elliptical. So, right, it's really important because people don't know how to think. People don't know how to make a discovery. So, now, on to Henry V, because this is really fascinating, and I'll save what LaRouche considers the most important part of this to the end. And there are a couple of things that he says. I'll just tell you about the drama. The question of these actors. Anyways, maybe I can't find it. But basically, when you go to a play, when you're watching a drama, you're looking at actors on a stage who are pretending to be characters that they represent, who are in the mind of the person writing the play. And what LaRouche said to us once about this, I thought was really, because I couldn't understand, he kept saying shadows of the real people. He said, look, the competent classical actor on stage never bellows out his own personality. You don't go to a play to see the actor parading around and saying, oh, I'm such a great person, look at me, look at me. That's not the point of the play. The point of the play is the actor hopefully is getting himself out of the way to allow the character intended from the mind of Shakespeare or another great playwright so that the population can watch this. So he said what you're looking at is, you should think of it as the two actors are never speaking to each other. The characters as ghosts behind the actors are speaking with each other through the actors, but the people that you think you're looking at on the stage interacting are not. And this is very important later. Now, this play, it's really kind of a setup. And I was really sort of puzzled by the end of it. It seemed paradoxical because at the beginning, I'll just tell you, King Henry, and Shakespeare apparently wrote the whole series of plays on Henry VI before this. He wrote this one later. He wrote this one after those. So people already knew the history. They knew what happened to Henry V. And basically what happens is he gets into a war with France. He wins. He marries the daughter of the King of France, and they become the rulers of England and France. And on the surface of it, there's certain scenes where you have a sense that Henry is very honorable and just. But something seems wrong because when you read the chorus at the end, the chorus describes what happens in the next play, which is Henry VI takes over. And Henry VI assigns a bunch of people because it's such a huge kingdom, one person can't run it, so he farms out the rulership of all these big territories, and he ends up losing France, and England ends up in a civil war. So you say, well, this very powerful king won this war, he was just, he told people don't rape and pillage and treat the French with dignity and blah, blah, blah. So why is it that things went so badly? How come this kingdom didn't survive? And it's deceptive at the beginning, where, although interesting, you have these two lords, the archbishops of the church, and they're having a discussion about Henry. because there's a controversy because apparently the church owes a certain amount of land and property to the king, to Henry. But if he would just take advantage of all the dukedoms and kingdoms and whatever that are owed to him in France, that's a much bigger amount of land. So the two of them are conspiring as to whether they can divert his attention, have him not take the property of the church, but get him pointed in the direction of France instead. And and one of them says, he goes through what they're talking about this bill where the church owes the money. So he says it must be thought on. If it pass against us, we lose the better half of our possession. For all the temporal lands which men devout by testament have given to the church would they strip from us, being valued thus. And he goes through, full 15 earls, 1,500 knights, 6,200 good esquires, and to relief of lazars and weak age of indigent faint souls past corporal toil, 100 almshouses right well supplied, and to the coffers of the king beside 1,000 pounds by the year. Thus runs the bill. And the other guy says, this would drink deep. And he says, 'twould drink the cup and all. So, I mean, they don't want to lose this. So then they're talking about the king. And Canterbury says, the king is full of grace and fair regard. And his assistant says, and a true lover of the holy church. Canterbury says, the courses of his youth promised it not. The breath no sooner left his father's body, but that his wildness, mortified in him, seemed to die too. Yea, at that very moment, consideration, like an angel, came and whipped the offending Adam out of him, leaving his body as a paradise to envelop and contain celestial spirits. Never was such a sudden scholar made, never came reformation in a flood with such a heady current, scouring faults, nor never hydra-headed willfulness so soon did lose his seat and all at once as in this king. And his assistant says, we are blessed in the change. Canterbury, hear him but reason in divinity, and all admiring with an inward wish, you would desire the king were made a prelate. Hear him debate of commonwealth affairs, you would say it hath been all in all his study. List his discourse of war, and you shall hear a fearful battle rendered you in music. Turn him to any cause of policy, the Gordian knot of it he will unloose, familiar as his garter, that when he speaks, the air a chartered libertine is still, and the mute wonder lurketh in men's ears to steal his sweet and honeyed sentences. So they're saying, that this king is just so just, and he had a rough childhood, but, sometimes later they say the strawberry blossoms beneath the thorns, and his father died, and all of a sudden he just became totally angelic and honorable and just, and when he speaks of war, it's like music, so great, this is a really honorable king. So then they say, and you have to think of the irony of this, all right, so let's manipulate him. Let's take this honorable king and we're going to manipulate him to desire to conquer France so he won't bother to take all the lands of the church. And then they get a little assistance from the ambassador of France, who's heard that the king is considering trying to get back all of his dukedoms. So he arrives at the English palace and he says, the king has sent me to give you this box. And they open the box and it's full of tennis balls. So this obviously makes him mad. And anyways, he decides to go to war, to launch this war. Now, what I wanted to do is to show you a couple of versions of this speech, because people, and you have to keep remembering, because what happens is that the thing fails. He loses, in other words, under his son, France is lost and England goes into a civil war. So if he's such a great genius, what's wrong what's the flaw? And of course, LaRouche says it's not the flaw of the protagonist, it's the culture as a whole. Oh, and one other scene I want to tell you, which is part of the setup, part of the paradox. There's a scene where some drunken guy has run around blaspheming the king, and he said nasty things about Henry. So Henry has caught on that there are 3 of his inner circle who are plotting to assassinate him. So what he does is he has a discussion about the guy who said whatever he said when he was drunk, and Henry asks the 3 guys who were plotting to kill him what they think should be the punishment. And Henry says, well, I think I'm just going to commute his sentence and let him go. And they say, well, we really think it's wonderful that you're so merciful, but don't you think it would be imprudent? I mean, then anyone will think they can go around slandering the king, so maybe you should torture him first. Maybe you should, and they use the names of all kinds of horrible tortures that I didn't have time to look up, but I don't think they're very nice, to do to this guy, and then let him go, and he will just appreciate your mercy that you did not execute him. So Henry is and Henry says, well, if I punish him so harshly, what am I going to do to people who have thoroughly chewed and digested their ill intent to commit a much worse crime, right? And then what happens is, so he says, no, let him go. He spoke out of drunkenness. I'm not going to punish him. And then he hands each of these 3 earls a little scroll that says, you've been found out. I know that you are plotting to assassinate me. And then they're all begging for mercy. So you see this scene and you think, wow, this guy is really clever. He sets them up. He shows how corrupt and rotten they are because they want to torture some poor guy who spoke out when he was drunk, and the 3 of them are planning to assassinate him. And then they're punished. So there's all these things that are set up where, in a sense, the thing that's being presented on the surface is how just and righteous Henry is. That's right. Anyway, so they decide, they go to war. He leaves to invade France. And the scene that everybody knows is the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, where the English army has been really beaten down. People are starving, they're weak, they're outnumbered by the French forces 5-1. And Henry goes around from tent to tent. Actually, maybe we should do that one. We should do that first. No, we'll do that second. The chorus. Anyway, and then he gives this speech, which is so famous. Everyone knows the quote, we few, we happy few, blah, 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 we band of brothers. So I want you to watch 2 performances of this, and we're going to watch Laurence Olivier first. And then we're going to watch one that I found on YouTube after much searching second.
What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this feast, let him depart. His passport shall be drawn, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so base. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day.
Stop for a second. Stop. All right, well, before I show the other one, any thoughts on this? What? That's Laurence Olivier. That's King Henry. Yeah, yeah. Think about it. Actually, let's go back. I want to play the... Okay. All right, well, you'll understand what the other guy, but basically he's saying, he's rallying the troops and saying that anyone who sheds blood on this day is my brother, and you're going to be remembered, and we will be remembered with honor, and everybody who wasn't here is going to really wish that they were here, and blah, 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 that, okay? Let's go back, because I want to play the chorus before that, right? The fourth. There are two, just to give you an example of the difference between people, I'm going to play now the chorus before the battle scene where they're describing, and again, the thing about this play, which is so amazing, is Shakespeare keeps saying, which is why I think it's somewhat sacrilegious to ever do this play as a movie, but anyway, he keeps saying, you have to imagine, here's the scene, we can't do it on this little stage, but imagine this. And I have two versions of people doing the chorus. And we're going to look at that, and then we're going to go back to this. So do the BBC one first.
Now entertain conjecture of a time when creeping murmur and the pouring dark fills the wide vessel of the universe. From camp to camp, through the foul womb of night, the hum of either army stilly sounds, that the fixed sentinels almost receive the secret whispers of each other's watch. Fire answers fire, and through their paly flames each battle sees the other's umbered face. Steed threatens steed in high and boastful neighs, piercing the night's dull ear. And from the tents, the armorers, accomplishing the nights with busy hammers closing rivets up, give dreadful note of preparation. The country cocks do crow, the clocks do toll, and the third hour of drowsy morning name. Proud of their numbers and secure in soul, the confident and over-lusty French do the low-rated English play at dice, and chide the crippled tardy-gated knight, who like a foul and ugly witch doth limp so tediously away. The poor condemned English, like sacrifices by their watchful fires, sit patiently and inly ruminate the morning's danger, and their gesture sad, investing lank lean cheeks and war-worn coats, presenteth them unto the gazing moon so many horrid ghosts. Oh now, who will behold the royal captain of this ruined band, walking from watch to watch, from tent to tent? Let him cry, praise and glory on his head, for forth he goes, and visits all his host, bids them good morrow with a modest smile, and calls them brothers, friends, and countrymen. Upon his royal face there is no note how dread an army hath enrounded him, nor doth he dedicate one jot of colour unto the weary and all-watched night, but freshly looks, and overbears a taint, with cheerful semblance and sweet majesty, that every wretch, pining and pale before, beholding him, plucks comfort from his looks. A largesse universal, like the sun, his liberal eye doth give to every one, thawing cold fear, that mean and gentle all behold, as may unworthiness define, a little touch of Harry in the night. And so our scene must to the battle fly, where, oh, for pity, we shall much disgrace with 4 or 5 most vile and ragged foils, right ill disposed, in brawl ridiculous, the name of Agincourt. Yet sit and see, minding true things by what their mockeries be.
That was that. I don't know if could people hear what he was saying at all? You got it, right? So the French army is all very confident they're going to win, and the English are all sitting there starving. The French want the morning to come because they're eager for the battle, and the English are nervous until Henry comes and inspires everyone. Now, watch this one. This is another one, the exact same thing, the exact same words.
The chorus to Act 4 of Shakespeare's Henry V. It is the eve of the Battle of Agincourt. Now, entertain conjecture of a time when creeping murmur and the pouring dark fills the wide vessel of the universe. From camp to camp, through the foul womb of night, the hum of either army stilly sounds, that the fixed sentinels almost receive the secret whispers of each other's watch. Fire answers fire, and through their paly flames each battle sees the other's umbered face. Steed threatens steed in high and boastful neighs, piercing the night's dull ear. And from the tents, the armourers, accomplishing the nights, with busy hammers closing rivets up, give dreadful note of preparation. The country cocks do crow, the bells do toll, and the 3rd hour of drowsy morning name. Proud of their numbers and secure in soul, the confident and over-lusty French do the low-rated English play at dice, and chide the crippled, tardy-gated knight who, like a foul and ugly witch, doth limp so tediously away. The poor condemned English, by their watchful fires, patiently sit, and inly ruminate the morning's danger. Their gesture sad, investing, lank, lean looks, and war-worn coats, presenteth them unto the gazing moon so many horrid ghosts. And now, who will behold the royal captain of this ruined band, walking from watch to watch, from tent to tent? Let him cry, praise and glory on his head, for forth he goes and visits all his host, bids them good morrow with a modest smile, and calls them brothers friends, and countrymen. Upon his face there is no note how dread an army hath enrounded him, nor doth he dedicate one jot of colour unto the weary and o'er-watched night, but freshly looks, and overbears a taint with cheerful semblance and sweet majesty, that every wretch, pining and pale before, beholding him, plucks comfort from his looks. A largess universal like the sun, his liberal eye doth give to everyone, thawing cold fear, that mean and gentle all behold, as unworthiness may define a little touch of Harry in the night. And so our scene must to the battle fly, where, oh, for pity, we shall much disgrace with 4 or 5 most vile or ragged foils, right ill-disposed in brawl, ridiculous, the name of Agincourt. Yet sit and see, minding true things by what their mockeries be.
All right, so what do you think? What, Dan?
The second one, the irony of the scene was getting through, that he spoke the speech as if he didn't, as if we didn't, as an audience, realize that England does win.
Right. Right. And more. What else? Bruce, you were saying something? Yeah, Alvin?
So just the idea of one's imagination can actually be activated by what he's saying. You can actually not just understand it, but become involved in enjoying it, actually, in what's going on, as opposed to merely trying to follow it.
Right. Well, did you find the first one distracting?
It was awful. The first one was awful.
It was awful. Because the sense you got was the guy doing it wanted you to look at him. It was all about him. And the second guy, you almost had the sense that the whole thing was in his mind, that he was looking inward, giving you a sense. What, Alexandria? Lawrence Olivier? King, yeah. Right. Right, and you do get a sense with the second guy that the drama is in your mind, right? He's just sitting there, and you get a sense, you get a very graphic sense of the thing unfolding. Now, I want to watch the Laurence Olivier one again, and then we're going to watch the other one of the same scene, Crispin's Day.
What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this feast, let him depart. His passport shall be drawn, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so base. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while Denny speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day!
Okay, now we're going to watch another version.
Fewer men with a greater share of honor. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, such outward things will not my desire. But be it a sin to covet honor, and I am most offending, so ally. God's peace. I would not lose so great an honor, as one man, methinks, shall share from me. I make rest, hope. Do not wish for one man more. Instead, proclaim it westward from my host, that he who hath not the stomach to fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made. We would not die in that man's company, who fears his fellowship to die with us. Today is the feast of Crispian. He who outlives this day and travels safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named. And he shall strip his sleeves and show his scars and say, these wounds I got on St. Crispin's Day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgotten. But he'll remember with advantages the feats he did that day. This story will the good man teach his son, and these names, like household words, will be familiar in his mouth. Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Salisbury and Gloucester. From this day to the end of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he who fights today, who sheds his blood with me, shall be my brother, be he never so vile. This day will gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed, who think themselves accursed that they were not here with us on this day. And they shall hold their manhoods cheap when any of us speaks, which fought here on St. Crispin's Day.
Just show the beginning again. The beginning is when he's talking about honor. I want you to look at his face. Can you do that? Yeah. Just the beginning.
Fewer men with a greater share of honor. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, such outward things will not my desire. But be it a sin to covet honor, and I am most offending, so ally.
Now, what do you think about that?
very exciting. Except,
I mean, it's hard to understand his
I'm
words.
just saying that anything that makes sense.
Yes, but
In the first one, I felt I was watching a commercial for Buy This Christmas, because Christmas is coming.
Crispin's Day, Crispin's Day.
I'm
Right.
just saying that as
Right.
a contrast. Was a salesman.
The first one, he was selling Crispin's Day. Okay.
Selling.
That's fair, that's fair. That's fair. Alexander,
And it left
what?
me with
What?
no feeling of,
Yeah. Okay.
you know, wishing to be there or,
Right.
or community or compassion.
Right.
I had to say, oh, now this one is just
Okay.
pure acting.
Pure acting?
I didn't need that for that one.
Okay. Alexander? Anyone else? What?
When he's characterizing honor, he's talking about fewer men has been honored. Am I correct?
He's saying
That those there
some
who
people
fight.
say that honor is such, I forget what the three things are, and honor are a sin. Well, if honor be a sin, then let me be the most sinful man alive.
I didn't get that from, now I understand what he said.
If coveting honor be a sin.
Do you have the text that you can read?
Yes.
Because it's been hard to hear a lot of
These are confused. It's very beautiful poetry, but you can't make it out.
Okay. He comes storming in because some people say we should have more soldiers. We need more soldiers. Okay. So he says, they say they want 10,000 more troops. He says, what's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin, if we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear, such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive. No faith, my cuz, wish not a man from England. God's peace, I would not lose so great an honor as one man more, as methinks would share from me. Right? I'm not going to share my honor with anyone. For the best hope I have, oh, do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company. That fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is Saint Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars, and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in their mouths as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by, from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, you, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England, now abed, shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while any speaks that fought with us on St. Crispin's Day. So,
Out of all that you just
but here's the point. I like this one, even though I think some of it's a little over the top, because when his eyes look at like honor, he looks like he's insane. And Henry is insane. That's the whole point. Who the hell would say, I am so honorable and I am so brilliant and so deserving of ruling half the entire planet that I'm going to plunge my country into war? Right, it sort of reminds me of General Lee, frankly, but, and that's the flaw, and it's being unfolded throughout the drama, and it's very tricky because you hear the religious leader speaking at the beginning of how Henry is transformed. He was raised in such crime, he was going to be such a crud and violent, and and now he's so eloquent and well-spoken. But then right away, if he was such a genius, why would they decide they could manipulate him like that? So the first thing they do, they say how brilliant and wonderful he is, and then they say, okay, let's get him off our back, because we don't want to give him any of our land, and let's have him go invade France. And then he's so honorable that he decides that he will do it. What?
trying to tell me that if you fight with me, I'm willing to die. I'm willing to die with you all the way.
Right.
But at the same time, and all those that was not here to actually fight with us, at the end of this whole thing, we're gonna win this no matter what. See what happens is that he believed, even though it may be crazy, but he believed that they're gonna go through, they're gonna win this war, and after they win this war now, they're going to look back in the years, and those who were around are going to look way back. They're going to say, hey, I was there.
Right. Now, here's the comparison. Take that speech and compare that in your mind to the last speech of Martin Luther King. I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land, right? Longevity may have its place, but I'm not worried about that now. Right? What's his demeanor and what is he going to die for?
Okay, take that. He's saying that I'm willing to die because I know what the outcome's going to be. He's saying he already seen the future within himself. He's seen the future. Basically, both of them have seen the future. That was both of them. Basically, both of them have seen the future, and everyone else don't see what they see. And also, it was like, it's almost like a thought that he didn't want to see no more wars. When he talking about Martin, he didn't want to see no more war, no more fighting, stuff like that. It was like, right now, it's like when you look at now and everything else, everybody else is water. But the game wasn't supposed to continue on the water.
Right. Well, here's the question. So when you get a sense, what was Martin Luther King dying for, and what was Henry telling everybody they should die for?
Is that it with everybody? Or just doing it?
I think well, does someone else want to have an idea about that? He says you can jump in.
So, that's like one of the conquerors, to me, it's like a conqueror rebel rising to
Right, now was his concern with how he would personally be remembered?
Well, we want to be as a drum major for justice.
Right, but he didn't say everyone who dies in the civil rights movement, every time Bloody Sunday is mentioned, our names are going to be raised and we will be honored, right? No.
100% clarification and other one wasn't.
Yeah, what, Marty?
Martin Luther King, when he made that speech, he said, I have been to the mountaintop, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there, but you will. This is essentially what he said. It's almost the exact words. And he was those words were the words of Moses upon reaching a mountaintop across the river of the promised land. But God said, Moses, you can't go, you won't go because you have done something to offend the Lord. That was the same speech. Moses led his people through the desert, and he didn't say anything about his army. He said, we are here, we're ready to go. You will have the promise, and it's been promised by the Lord.
Right, although even it's different because since you had the question of Christ afterwards, and there's the question which, regardless of faith, a question of immortality, of one's contribution to future generations. In a sense, it's even beyond, because you're saying the meaning of my physical life is not in the physical, right. Your physical life ends with your life and death, but the question of your soul or your identity is something that transcends that. Dan?
I was going to say that I think the further irony of the speech that's interesting is that he says, you'll be remembered, and you this and that. And certainly they are remembered in Shakespeare's speech. I mean, we're saying it right now, but of course, as you pointed out, it was written after Henry VI was written, after we already knew the outcome, after everyone, and so everyone could see that Henry was right when he said you always remember, that he was wrong when he said you'll be remembered for your honor, or that
Right.
you might actually accomplish something that's positive.
Right, that's true. That's a very great irony. Alvin?
Yeah, I've only seen movie versions of Henry V. I don't know anything about it. They have, the movies don't give you any real relation. I haven't read it. I haven't read a lot of Shakespeare. It's through the season that I've read several times, and I think that's a little more straightforward. So in a sense, easier. But when you were laying out earlier about how Shakespeare setting you up and working you through a fellow who seems like a just and moral person that is looking to improve the quality of life. See, that's inferior, right? That's black and white. The audio's not good. He's an amateur. But I got the idea immediately that this guy's crazy. This guy's crazy. So if I recognize, so I can read this, so I can experience that, because I guess the idea of always what Glenn talks about is, what is that great mind in music or in art or in literature trying to convey? Now, when you see the Olivier, that's completely lost.
He doesn't look crazy, right? He doesn't look crazy.
No,
when
it's
he's
a rally. It's
Yeah.
a rally. Rick says, to join the Marine Corps.
Right.
John Wayne type thing.
Right.
Yet I think it's mistaken oftentimes to say, well, that was really a different style, a different era of acting. Where no, it's that there's an intent here that is, whether Olivier knows it or not, but that there's an intent here that through the destruction of the culture, not died, so you have no relationship now to Shakespeare or other great composers or artists, because this is what's done, what's been done to the culture.
Right, that's a very good point, and that's the most important. Yes, go ahead.
I think it is a different practice, and I think it's also about the credibility of the audience at the time. So before World War II, and probably more relevantly before Vietnam, there was a certain honour attached to war. And I think after that, you see that there is less honour attached to war. And so you get the seeping in of irony, say with that, you see the one after Derek Jacobi. And then you see this guy where that has become fully realised in him as an actor. We are to understand that he's fully mad. But that has developed as our culture has developed and as wars continued. And it's a different attitude that people have now to wars.
So you don't think Shakespeare intended for him to be mad?
He may have, yes, he may well have done, but the realisation of it comes back to this become more pronounced as time has moved forward, because the public's attitude and tolerance for when it becomes lessened, the irony and the sort of inherent disapproval of it becomes realised in the acting, especially in this.
That's true, although I think in a lot of modern, like this, there's one version by Richard Burton and so on, they don't really bring out the irony.
I think he did Richard III, he accepts a lot of that voice.
Right.
That's craziness.
But it's also, because what you're saying gets to what I wanted to, Evelyn, go ahead.
But all British kings were mad. They were fighting, one killing the next one, because they wanted the crown and
Well,
the power.
what's
So
mad
each
is the,
one was crazy.
not all of them were crazy. Actually, Henry VII, who came later, was a collaborator of Louis XI in France, and he had a different, more republican with a small r conception about the development of England. However, it is true that the principle of oligarchism is mad. Yeah, because
You only have this crown if you can kill or obliterate the one before. That's the only way.
well, and it's all
about control.
it's about bloodline, which negates what it is to be a human being. Because once you say that you are what your fathers were and you are connected to this royal family based on your pedigree, then there's no difference between that and breeding dogs or whatever. My mother's view of the world, which is why she didn't like my husband. But anyway, that's another story. What, Rod?
I see two different things being said. Henry is basically saying anybody who's not with us on this day is a loser.
Well, he is saying that.
He's
definitely saying that, but
they have nothing going for them.
Okay.
They're losers.
And
Whereas King is saying something completely different. He's saying, I may not be there with you, but I know you're going to get there, which is a whole different thing.
but what's there, and what are they winning?
Well,
That's a
King
totally
spells that out
That's
in his
different
speech.
thing. I mean, to take another military example, which I found really fascinating recently, and I thought they depicted it very well in this movie, Gettysburg, where, and this is what LaRouche is getting at, and then I'll read the prologue to this play. You have a scene, and I'm not sure why they did it that way in the movie, unless it was based on something that was said, but General Buford, who had this little cavalry corps of maybe 2,500 or so, and Meade, Lincoln had a horrible time getting generals. He had McClellan for a long time, who just never wanted to win and always ran away and always lost. He got rid of him, he brought in Meade, and Meade, it was Pennsylvania, and he was from Pennsylvania, so he was more motivated to win, although he also was very laid back and cautious. So you have Lee's army of 70,000 rebel soldiers marching into Gettysburg. The other Union troops are like 14,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And Buford looks, and what he describes is he says, and he gives you this totally graphic description of the scene unfolding on a stage in his mind's eye, about how the Confederate Army is going to march in, the Union soldiers are going to be way held back, they're going to take, and he points this hill and this hill and this hill, and they're going to be perfectly positioned, and then 8 hours later, Meade is going to arrive with the Union soldiers, they won't be able to get any positions, they're going to be routed, and then Britain, France, and everyone who was waiting on this battle to recognize the Confederate Army, to recognize the Confederate States, because that was what was at stake at Gettysburg, they're going to recognize the South as a sovereign republic. So Buford envisions in his mind's eye a drama unfolding, and then he says to himself, I cannot allow this to happen. And he comes up with a plan which is sacrificial, which is to take 2,500 soldiers to a narrow point in the road where these 70,000 troops have to get through, so he has the maximum chance of doing damage, and decides that they're going to go on a total attack, even if they lose every single man, to delay the entry of the Confederate Army. And that's what he does. And it's a total bloodbath, and I don't know how many people they lose. Luckily he lives, but another major important general gets killed. But it works. And the Confederate Army is delayed, and the Union Army is able to position themselves and actually win the battle. So this, again, is an example of someone who actually thought that we were talking about earlier, that you imagine where events are going to be in the future as if you're in a drama on a stage, and then you act. The knowledge of the future causes you to find the courage to do what's required in the present. Now, I happened to talk to Mr. LaRouche last night about this play just a little bit, and he said the very most important part is the prologue. And so, you'll forgive me, but I'm going to read it to you. And then we should just discuss why that would be. It's the chorus, and the chorus is one person. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold this swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirit that hath dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. Since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, and let us, ciphers to this great accompt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow oceans part asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them, pounding their hoof with the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings. Carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me chorus to this history, who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. That's the beginning. And the question that I didn't get answered, and I don't know enough about what was happening in England at the time that Shakespeare wrote this, is why this prologue for this play? Because you would say, isn't it true of every play? And the chorus throughout, like what you heard, later, is telling you, imagine the scene. So you're in this little theater, and he's saying, and then it's more plays, because first of all, you're looking at this little wooden stage, and you have to imagine two great monarchies. Every person is 1,000 soldiers. The horses are there. You have to imagine the scene. And then he sets you up on King Henry. Because the first scene is these two religious guys saying what a great and honorable and noble guy he's become. So that's what's given to your mind's eye on the surface. And then they say, let's trick him. Right? So it's one paradox after the next, which is the challenge to your mind. So anyway, think about that, because it's what I wanted to just say in closing is that, given the question at the beginning, which is, why are we in this mess? If you were to step back and now look at what we're facing as if on a stage, what's happening in the world? You have the collapse of the euro system. You have the financial and economic collapse of the entire transatlantic system. In Germany and Spain, people are printing their own currencies. In Spain, there are now towns where they're using the peseta. The euro is not going to last much longer. You have food shortages, very likely, because of the extreme weather of last year. So by the time we get to spring, and if you look at the amounts of cereals, there's a very good video on the website of cereal produced per capita. And granted, there are large parts of the planet where people consume sorghum instead of wheat or rice, but nonetheless, Marcia held up these two little things, and that's what's produced per capita. It's unbelievable. Per capita, what we have not produced. And you could do an emergency mobilization using the, other hemispheres of the planet to address this, but no such mobilization has been done. We're facing next year extreme weather. When did the first hurricanes and tornadoes start? Last year, May, March, something like that, right? Hurricanes, Missouri was flooded. Remember, North Dakota, whatever, people were told you can't come back for 2 months. 25% of our farmland was wiped out. And then because the system is disintegrating, there's a major push for war from Obama's pro-empire, pro-British Empire handlers to go to war. And then who is the President of the United States at this moment? So that even though you have massive resistance from the US military, you have a great deal of resistance from the Israeli military, not from Netanyahu, who's nuts, but people in the military who don't think Israel should be a pawn for a giant war. Even though you have that resistance, you have in the United States a guy with a Nero mentality, and he's the President of the United States. And you can imagine if you're Shakespeare or someone else looking at this unfolding with this kind of character running the United States, the question is what are the chances that we are not going to be seriously devastated, destroyed, or massively devastated by major thermonuclear war, because that's where we're headed with this Iran and Syria thing, if we go to that, or extreme weather, or the effects of a blowout of the transatlantic financial system. Alvin.
Disappear if you object to love.
Yeah, now, yeah, that's right. Although I think we face worse before they can round us all up, but we'll see, yeah.
Could you explain the British Empire?
Yeah, well, what you have, I mean, very explicitly, if you take the royals, like Prince Philip, who founded the World Wildlife Fund, his view, and he said it publicly, is that the world should only have 2 billion people. So he's acting that way. And the Queen went and addressed the Commonwealth of all the poor subject colonies and pushed all of this global warming nonsense, because it is a way of pushing genocide. If you say don't consume, don't have carbon, don't produce carbon dioxide and no nuclear power, what you're doing is you're lowering the ability of the planet to sustain 7 billion people. But it's also the Inter-Alpha Group, which is a bunch of banks after Nixon took the dollar off gold. It's not native to England. It's Rome, Venice, the Netherlands, and then William of Orange brought this to England. But it's old families who think that they do think in terms of human beings being animals. So it's the it's the monarchy, and then it's the what's called the Inter-Alpha Group of banks. Well, there's a list in our literature. You can get on the website. It's about a dozen of them. But like the Royal Bank of Scotland is in there, and others. And when you look at where all this bailout money went, it's like a recycling. It keeps going into this group of banks. Now $29 trillion that's been issued here, which no one seems to have seen any of. But it's in there. And it's a lot of offshore, mysterious stuff. But there's a list, there's a much more detailed list in our literature. But it's not the case. A lot of people say, oh, the Queen, she's just a figurehead. Not true. You look at what she owns, which mercenary companies in Africa that have gold and diamonds in their... It's in the report. It's in the report. It's a lot. The major ones. Now their names are eluding me. There was Barrick Gold, which is not so much hers, it was Bush Sr. and some other people. But anyway, it's in the report. I haven't looked at it. And the armies, because how are you going to get all these raw materials? It's better if you can exterminate the people and set up so-called civil wars, like the World Wildlife Fund sets up parks that straddle the borders. So remember in '96, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda? Somehow all these people get trained in these parks, which governments don't have sovereignty over. And you have all these mercenary armies, guerrilla warfare training.
So that's why you chose probably not to go to Rwanda and stop genocide.
Well, there's no intent, and there's a difference. I mean, you look at various things which we could do, like the way Clinton responded in Congo when they had these horrible diseases, and he did a huge mobilization, and they took fire hoses from the West Coast and the Army Corps of Engineers, and they were able to pump out, I forget what the figures were, how many millions of gallons of clean water per day. So it's not like we don't know how to do mobilizations to save people.
I think also the Congo, because it has a lot of contact, which is vital to self-efficacy in the park. So Congo is actually an important place for us to stay involved with.
Right, but if we had... Yeah, but Clinton was a little different than either Bush or Obama in terms of caring about the population. We saw Obama's view in Haiti, right? The Army Corps of Engineers says, look, these people are going to be in a floodplain. They're going to get cholera, dysentery. We need to move them. And Obama says, oh, no, I don't want to look like Jimmy Carter. Let them die. Yes?
Isn't the Alpha Group part of what was formerly the Rothschild Consortium?
Well, that's who pulled it together.
Part of what George Prescott Bush was involved in with the New York.
With what?
With the New York banks.
You mean Bush Sr. or you mean Prescott?
George Prescott Bush, that's Bush's grandfather.
Prescott Bush.
Yeah, George Prescott.
there's no George. It's just Prescott. It's just Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush.
That's his name, it's Prescott.
His first name also.
I don't think so, but it doesn't matter. It's a fine point. It doesn't matter. The point is for people here who should be able in your mind's eye to look at this. So when we say Obama has to be removed and people say, oh no, we're going to wait till the elections. Oh no, well if we were to get a new president, and what on earth is there worth voting for right now for president? We think, Mitt Romney is going to save us from this? How about Rick Perry? Governor Christie, maybe he'll run and put everyone on the Hostess Twinkie diet. I mean, in other words, what is the point of saying we're going to wait until the elections when you have nobody running who is qualified and the entire thing is unfolding over the next months? And if Obama were, even if he were not physically removed, because you probably can't do an impeachment over this short of time, but suppose there was a vote, an impeachment vote in the Congress, or suppose people in the Congress start saying, you know what, he did an illegal war in Libya, he wants to round people up and detain them, he, this and that, he has totally violated the Constitution, and his credibility were destroyed, and you were forced to do like what some people are saying, like Lyndon Johnson, and withdraw, so that you ended up with someone else running as the Democratic Party nominee, and that might force the Republicans to come up with a human. You could change the entire dynamic of things on this point. And the question, and the trick is the population. Why don't people, quote unquote, see this? Why do people think that you really have to laugh. All these people who say I'm waiting till the election, what on earth is there to vote? What of any of these candidates makes you think we're going to be out of this crisis? That is like the craziest thing in the world. So, what? Yeah. If he wants to. Well, he's a puppet, but he is using, look, Obama just appointed a bunch of people illegally. He called them recess appointments, and the Senate was in session. That's pretty wild. Yeah, he made it up, in other words. There's something called MSU. What, Alexandra? Yeah, well, that's definitely true, and that's what the greatest playwrights, Schiller or Shakespeare, the whole idea is that hopefully the audience would leave the theater better than when they came in. You would hope. And I must say, this play had that effect on me because I thought the thing at the beginning with the two religious leaders was a little weird, but then Henry seemed so honorable, and he conducted himself honorably in the war, and he said don't steal anything and don't torture people, and say, oh, he seems pretty good. And then you read the thing at the end where you realize they lose France and England goes into a civil war. And then you're thinking, well, okay, so something was clearly wrong. And then you go back and think through the various decisions that were made and the dynamic of the whole thing, because of course that's the whole point about drama. What's the culture of the day, which is why I think they have, this play has an enormous amount of these other crazy characters doing goofy things. And you get the sense of a really kind of degenerate culture. People don't have much purpose in their life. There's some woman running a whorehouse, and I mean, you know, that's like the whole backdrop. So, as usual, the failure in a drama is not what they always teach you in school. There's the protagonist, and there comes a punctum saliens, and he makes the wrong decision at that point. But it's a question of, is the person strong enough to break from the popular culture? And that's made very clear in Hamlet, because it starts, there is something rotten in the state of Denmark, right? So it's, you already get, he says right at the beginning, it's the entire nation which is corrupt. And then Hamlet goes along with the corruption.